representing Franchise Secrets, Erik Von Horn.
Hey listeners, if you like this podcast and you want more content on all things franchising, then you'll love our free Facebook group. It's the largest and most helpful Facebook group in all of franchising. Join our free community of current franchisees and franchisors, plus future franchisees and franchisors at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook.
Welcome to the Franchise Secrets podcast with your host, Erik Van Horn, here today with Daniel Shemtob. He is the winner of season 2 and the AllStars of the Great Food Truck Race. And now he's franchising Born from the Lime Truck. And I can't wait to get into it with you, Daniel, and learn about you, your background, the show, franchising, food truck stuff, all of it. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Erik. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, man, we probably got to start, there's a lot that we just went over, from being on TV twice, AllStars, winning both of them, and then now franchising. Take us back to where did all of this start?
Yeah, I mean, it all started with a really young Daniel, 21. I had started my first business. It was a real estate services company, and I hated going to work. It was the most bizarre experience because I was an entrepreneur, and I was I had TV commercials, and I was really thinking I was doing something right, and it failed really quickly because I just didn't like it. And I decided at that moment, I'm pretty young. How could I already be miserable at work? And I was like, I need to go into something I absolutely love. And I've always loved food and hospitality. And so at the time, it was 2009 or something like that. And so it wasn't a great time in the economy. And so I thought about doing a restaurant, and I was like, oh, I definitely can't do that. And a food truck was the most accessible. I mean, we started it with $14,000, which we bootstrapped to who knows what end. We worked every shift on that truck, but it was this amazing passion project that I was just able to put together.
So how old were you?
I was 21 years old when I started the truck.
So bootstrapped everything. Why was it always the same type of food, the same type of cuisine?
No. In fact, in our first year, we would do a brand new menu every day. So we would get in ingredients, and we would just decide what we wanted to cook on the spot. And I think that was a lot of our appeal, because people had such bad FOMO that they'd be eating at the truck 300 days straight. And if you know, a truck is mobile, so it's not like we're in the same location every day. So sometimes they have to drive 30 minutes to find us. Sometimes it's 5 minutes away. And so that was a really fun way to kind of get going. And then our food cost was a mess. It was not a great way to run a business, but it was really fun for us. And so what we decided was, when we opened our brick and mortar a couple years later, that we were going to pick the favorites that either were executable consistently, or we knew that was a crowd favorite. And that's how we kind of landed on the menu that we have today.
So I want to jump into the TV show, how that came to be. But before we get there, I'm just fascinated with QSR, with this type of industry, food and beverage. I have friends that are in it. I just did a post out on social media today. I think the largest franchisee in food and beverage has over 2,000 locations. And so there's a lot to be said for food and beverage. Some people think franchising is only food and beverage, Subway and pizza, and other people know everything outside of food and beverage, and they're really scared of food and beverage. So I'd like to get into some of that with you. But explain the difference, from your perspective, going from food truck into brick and mortar. What was that transition like?
It's an unusual challenge if you're not used to it. So I think the thing that I laugh about the most is it was the first week I was in my restaurant, and in food service, there's this thing called cater wrapping. And it's basically where you take plaster wrap and you go under whatever you're wrapping and over, because if things move in transit or sauces kind of turn around, they'll never spill. And so cater wrapping is extremely wasteful because you're using extra plastic wrap, but it's extremely important when you're on the go. So I was cater wrapping everything in my kitchen. And one of the other sous chefs came to me and they're like, Daniel, why is everything cater wrapped in the walk-in? And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, no, your fridge isn't moving. Your fridge is stable. The restaurant is stable. You need to realize it's a different environment. And I think that was kind of like the eye-opening moment that I was in a totally different environment. And, you know, the biggest challenge in adjustment is a food truck. You're really able to kind of adjust to your availability. So if I'm not in the mood to go out, I don't go out. You know, outside of like, you know, making prior commitments and having locations, you get time off in between to recalibrate. Restaurant doesn't get that luxury. You got to be open every day. You got to have consistent hours. You can't run out of dishes and cross them off your menu, which is very food truck culture-esque. And so I feel like the food truck is a great way to wet your whistle. It's extremely challenging business to run. It's not, you know, it has its unique challenges from the brick and mortar, but I think it's kind of like dipping a toe into the QSR world. And once you've actually got in the pool, and that's the QSR world, I think it's a step above it. It's a bigger capital contribution. It's more hours, more overhead, more risk. And so I think the food trucks are the perfect gateway for new entrepreneurs to learn about business. And there's so many things you have to manage, but really diving into QSR, that's a bigger challenge, and with greater success because you can actually scale it a little easier than the food truck as things get going.
Yeah, that's what I've seen. My friends that are in it, they can scale. It's a lot easier to scale, and it's a lot easier to scale QSR versus some other franchises. So the TV, like how did you get on TV? Give us that whole thing, because you're getting ready. Get ready, because you're going to be telling this story a lot, I'm sure. So we're one of the first here. But like how did that even come to be?
So when the first season of the Great Food Truck Race came out, we had just started our truck. So it was me, my partner at the time, and our third employee. And we knew if they were going to film a second season that we were perfect for it. We had known each other for 15 plus years. We were creative. We were creating crazy food from a food truck that would range from $30 to $100. And so we were really kind of forward thinking as far as food trucks go. And so sure enough, a few months later, they were casting for the next season, and we had a food blogger, Jason, who introduced us to the Food Network, and the Food Network called us. We had a really fun audition tape. They really loved us, and they just asked us to do the show. The best part about it was I think they knew they were going to put us on the show, but they'd only told us and confirmed like 5 days before. So it was like such a scramble to go on that first season. And it was 2 months on the road, and we had our business that we had to keep operating. So we ended up putting a couple of people in charge. And it's funny because the guy we left in charge is the person who actually went on the AllStars season with us and who replaced my partner. So, but yeah, I mean, it was, I think, right place, right time. And then we had a really fun concept, and the partners were really, we have a lot of rapport. Like we yell at each other in the truck. We're comfortable in that way. So we knew it was kind of perfect for TV.
And then after, so you won season 2, what kind of impact did that press and that have on your local business at that point?
It was insane. The impact that being on that show did for the business. So it was, again, right place, right time. At the time season 2 came out, food trucks were just getting super popular. And so it was, food truck culture was at an all-time high. We were at that point where we had just won that episode or that season. And so we went from 1 truck operating successfully to 4 trucks being slammed, where people were driving from Vegas 6 hours to eat at our truck. And we went from doing like, I think 400K the year before we went to the show to like 2.4 million. Wow. So it was an insane increase. And I had partnership offers, like celebrity offers. So it was really like one of the most insane jumps, I think, in entrepreneurship. And what was so cool about it was never like, I thought I was going to get off the show and I was going to get a call from Food Network. You want your own show? I was going to get a call from like Aramark. You want to be in every stadium? And it was never like that. But what it was is it allowed me to get every foot in the door. It allowed me to create so much more opportunity for the brand. And so that was the big perk of it. It was like, it just opened every door, and it was up to me to see how I wanted to capitalize on.
So a lot of people have a hard time when there's so many doors opening up for them. They want to say yes to everything, because you go from not having all these doors open to having a lot of doors open at one time. So I can just imagine you had to say no to a lot. Like, give us that internal dialogue that you had with yourself, and how difficult was that?
Where were you, Eric, 10 years ago? I said yes. I said yes to everything. I wish I didn't say yes so much. I needed a mentor like you. No, I said yes to too much. I think that was my big lesson. I'm so ambitious. I mean, even now I feel very ambitious, but I feel much more focused, which is the big difference throughout the last 10 years. But I was an entrepreneur for 2 years. You know, I didn't even know that year that and I was saying we went to 2.4 million. I had no idea how to control payroll. Our payroll was running rampant at like 40, 50%. And if you consider for a food truck, that's insane. And so I said yes to a lot of things. And I think I'm glad I did. I learned so much. I think the entrepreneur education is a very difficult and expensive one. And as you learn, the exponential return on that investment from what you learn from your failures is insane. And so I'm super grateful that I said yes, but it was hard. And I think, you know, you don't know what you want to do and you don't know what you don't want to do when you're so young. And so I was really saying yes to almost everything. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't take it back. I think I had a really tough partnership issue. I think that was the one that I'm really grateful I did, but I think it was the biggest learning experience. I opened these brick and mortars and I had an amazing partner, but you know, things changed through partnership. And I learned so much from him that I would have done it again, even though it was like really sticky for the last 3 years and it was difficult to get out of. I think it was like one of the best things I've ever done. So I guess I was glad I said yes, but in retrospect, I think it would have been nice to say no to certain things and really focus in on like a couple of ththings rather than trying to do everything at once.
Well, because you learned so much. I mean, it's so clear just from hearing you talk, and we all have done that as entrepreneurs, and we you know, we get punched in the face, we make wrong decisions, and we say yes to too many things, and then you learn from it. And so it's that learning that I'm always grateful for. I'm like, you know, yeah, that was difficult, but man, I wouldn't trade that because I'm different today and I'm making different decisions. I'm making better decisions today than I did, you know, when I was making those decisions earlier. Tell us about partnerships? Because I've been talking a lot about partnerships to my mastermind. I've been in 18 or 19 different partnerships or different partners and at over the last 20 years. Some of them have been great. Some of them haven't been so great. So what were some of the things, advice that you would give to people that are thinking about getting into partnerships? Just, you know, what would you say to them?
I just did a full like podcast, or not podcast, but like a story on YouTube about picking a right partner.
Well, so what's the YouTube channel? Because I mean, I love it.
It's my name, just Daniel.Shemtob or Daniel Shemtob. So SHEMTOB.
All right, we'll put that in the show notes. So we'll check out your YouTube channel. But you did a whole thing on that. So summarize that, and then people can go back and watch that.
Yeah, thank you. So what's interesting about it is I think with partnership, I kind of have a few steps that I like to take. One, I think it's really important to do an exercise of what 10 years looks like with that partner. Because if your vision is not aligned, it's going to be too challenging to stay in partnership. And so I think the number one thing is getting aligned on vision, because that will really kind of just set the tone. Because if you guys want to get to the same place and you have a difference of opinions, okay, so be it. That's a good thing sometimes, you know, and it's great to complement each other there. But if you, for instance, and this is my first partner, he only wanted one truck and he wanted to live in that truck and he never wanted to expand past that. For me, one truck was something that I thought was only going to be in like the first 6 months and we were going to expand past that. So we never were aligned and we never had that discussion. And of course, when I went to go do the second truck, this is uncomfortable for me. I didn't want to do this. And he went and he opened his own restaurant and he lives on top of it. He's that type of person. We never had that discussion. So I think the first step is alignment. Then I have a weird one, but I think the next step needs to be the operating agreement. And there needs to be a little bit of funkiness in the operating agreement. And the reason being is because I like to see how you work through issues. I think when you can work through issues with a partner and you're aligned on vision, then the rest is going to fall in place. You might have arguments, but it's always for the better good. If you can't argue through those, you know, those negotiations, and let's say that thing in that operating agreement is sticky and he goes, you know what, you either sign it or I don't sign it, you know, like end of story. Well, you know that this is not going to be a fun partnership if that's his attitude. But if he goes, okay, well, why do you want this? And then let me see if I can remedy that by doing this. And you guys are able to get through it with dialogue and communication, then I feel like you can almost overcome anything. And so I know it's a lot longer form of a conversation and there's a lot more nuance to partnership. But I think at the very minimum, being aligned and being able to communicate, that's what will get you through a lot of the challenges that partnerships have.
That's great. And I like, even because, I mean, the more that you work on that operating agreement early on, and that brings up so many different questions. I mean, like, you have to think through things, and you have to think through it from different angles and whatnot. So, and then, like you said, that is a much bigger discussion, but I wanted to get your 2 cents on partnerships, since you kind of dropped some hints, like you were in it and it didn't work out the way that you had envisioned it. And of course it didn't, because, the visions weren't aligned, but that is so common out there. It's happened to me before, and it's so common. So I love being able to help people that are thinking about that right now. And it sounds so simple, but you need to make sure your visions are aligned and walk down the road, like you said, not just what's the vision, what's the goal, what's it like in 10 years, and put a timeline on it, and where are we then? One of the things I always like to say, and we'll wrap this up unless you have anything else, is the partnership is an entity, and the partners have to make the best decisions for that entity, and not just their own personal opinions and what they think personally and what fits into their personal life. It's about that entity, that LLC or S Corp or whatever it is. So that's great. Anything else on operating agreements or partnerships that you've learned that you would want to, just give advice to your younger self with that?
Yeah, I think the last part is, and this is just in anything, I think, but things have to be fair. So in a partnership, if one person is doing all the work and they get 50% of the company, it's only going to last so long, and it's like, they either need to be compensated with salary, or they need to be compensated with more interest in the company. And so I've learned that, sometimes you get aggressive with partnership, or you get aggressive with, trying to negotiate a good deal for yourself. But I've always learned that if it's not fair, it's never going to work anyways. And so for me now, I actually let's say I'm working with a less experienced type of operator, and they're willing to let me kind of pick the deal, which has happened before. I work through it to see what they would want, so that down the line, we can discuss what's fair. And I always bring it up. Hey, is this fair? Is it fair to everybody in the group? And I want to make sure that they're saying it is, because if they're saying it is empty, well, I can't control that. But if they're saying, no, actually it's not fair, then I want to work through it. And then, so I guess this is kind of the same thing about working through sticky situations, but I think it's important to uncover issues. I think people who bury their head in the sand, that's the last step of partnership that's going to really be difficult. I was really scared. I had that tough partner, and I was really scared to confront him. I think it was kind of because he was like 30 years older than me and much more experienced than me, and I was like the young one trying to learn business. And I was embarrassed or shy to ask for things that I needed. And it came up as a lot of issues in the company. So I feel like the last point is really just, if you have issues, you have to communicate them. And so I guess back to that point of communication and vision alignment.
So you won season 2 of the Great Food Truck Race, and you experienced the opportunities, the doors that opened up. So you knew going into the AllStars that it was going to open up that probably on steroids for you. So what happened? Like, give us some of the details on going into that season of the AllStars.
Well, so there's a good and a bad with it. The AllStars is the hardest thing you could possibly ever do. You're taking winners from past seasons to compete against other winners. So when I went on the show season 2, right away, and there's no judgment, but right away I noticed some teams were not going to make it. They just didn't have whatever it was, whether it was like the savvy or the energy. It's a tough show. It's a tough competition. And so going into the All-Star season, it's not like that. Everybody's won their season. They know how to win. They know how to be competitive. They know how to go into the gray of the game, which is really how you win. And so it was scary. And on top of that, we had a new teammate that I at least worked with in the past who ended up being phenomenal. So it was just kind of like a little bit like that. And then to your point, knowing what it did for my business, and then knowing if you're the winner of the winners, like you're the all-time best food truck that to ever exist, that is like serious clout. And so I think going into it, there was just like so much pressure. And I know, so I'm like very much about mental health. Like that's something I've been really working on over the past 5 years. And I mean, it went out the window. I started eating very terrible because you're on the road, so you're not eating well. I stopped doing my exercising, which is my way of really kind of releasing energy. And I couldn't stop thinking about competition, go to bed thinking about competition, wake up. And it's 7 days a week. And if you're not competing the full time, you're falling behind your competitors. So just being in that environment, it was tough. And knowing what's on the line and knowing what it means for your business and for your organization and for everyone who's sacrificed, I mean, it's really a lot.
How long were you doing it? How long was the season, like filming?
Yeah, so the first time was 2 months. And then this time they did it kind of an abridged version because of the pandemic, and it was 5 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now there's a franchise opportunities born from the Lime truck. When did you first start thinking about franchise? I'm sure it was way back when, but when did that really start, coming into play for you?
Yeah, so we had thought about franchising the brand in 2016. I'm obsessed with the idea of franchising. I think giving entrepreneurs a chance to run their own business within the box, but kind of a little bit without, and having that as your community or network, the people you go to work with every day, I think it's incredible. And I'm inspired by it, and I want to be inspirational to it. It's like a very give and take environment. So the idea was always deeply rooted in me. But I wanted to do it at the right time. And as I mentioned, I had some partner challenges. And so, doing it this time around, I bought out my investors and my partners last year. So it was the right time to do it. And then we got the show, and I just figured like everything is kind of culminating to this moment for me to do it. And so I went to work basically as soon as I left the competition, because we filmed it a while back. And I was like, let's get everything dialed in. Let's finish this project that we wanted to do. And the cool thing about it too is I'm building a really amazing team of fractional and full-time employees that have been deep in the franchise world to help me do this, because I think that I'm really great at some things, some parts of the business, but I think I have so much to learn about others. And so surrounding myself by way better talent who's much more deep into the franchise world, and I'm just excited to launch it.
That's really smart. That's the advice I give new franchisors is, you're going into a whole new business. And if you don't have people that know the franchising side of that business, then, it's going to be a struggle, because you're no longer in the food business, the food truck business, the brick and mortar food business. You are in the helping franchisees be successful business. And so that's great that you have those people that are helping you. And what is it that you're good at? Like, what are you great at?
Well, what am I great at? Oh, that's a great, I get to brag for a second.
Yeah.
So
no, this is your opportunity to brag. I asked you to brag.
Yeah. I think my special sauce, it's a combination of things. I think I'm really good at team building and leadership. I'm a servant leader. When I walk into my restaurants, I'll bust the table before anybody else. So I think putting together a team is something that I really value and I really love being a part of and I'm good at. And then I think, obviously chefing, menu development. Our menu is always really good and it's really creative and it's very sustainable now. That was one of the big focuses I had. And then marketing. So I can create really fun collaterals. We just launched this beautiful taco box that resolves the soggy tacos when you take to-go tacos. So now it's like a DIY taco. So I always kind of position myself as the creative entrepreneur that has been humbled through, I've only been an entrepreneur for 11 years, but I've been through a lot. And so I've employed hundreds of people. I've been through partnerships. I've sold, bought companies. I've really done a lot in that 11 years. And so using my expertise and then being able to partner it with creativity and kind of good outlook, and then building a team around it. I think that's my special sauce.
So when someone becomes a franchisee, do they have an option of starting out with just the food truck? Do they have to do one or the other? Is there a certain thing that they have to follow? Or is it, what is a new franchisee? How do they start?
So a new franchisee cannot just do a food truck. They have to do brick and mortar. The reason being is a food truck by itself without brick and mortar is actually very difficult to operate and has big costing issues. But when you have a restaurant assist in it, it becomes a very profitable system. And to give you an idea, actually, my profits have significantly
Now,
increased.
now you have to be careful, don't you? Now now you're a franchisor. You can't just talk about the profits and everything that you used to talk about when you just had your own business.
They trained me well. They trained me well. I know. I was like, oh, I shouldn't say that actually. Okay. But
I can see that start to go, that play going on in your head.
Yeah. But yeah, once the restaurant opened and supported the truck, it just became easier to operate. It became a lot less challenges. We use staff for both. We use food for both. So I think that it's really important to have the restaurant first, but the food truck, it's like the marketing maven of the brand, right? It goes out into a new market. Everybody sees it. It gets to do local events, gets to create community, and it gets to go into and input itself into a food truck community that exists in a lot of cities that's very tight knit. And so I think the really cool thing is, like, I think the brick and mortar is essential, but I think the food truck is what makes the brand great. And so I'm hoping, and I'm not requiring it, but I'm hoping that franchisees would do both. But at a minimum, I think the brick and mortar is essential, and I think the brick and mortar is what needs to exist.
So if you would have done this before the pandemic versus after the pandemic, would it look any different? In other words, does the brick and mortar look any different, feel any different, customer flow any different, being post-pandemic versus pre-pandemic?
No, I don't think so. I think the only thing is we launched that taco box, which is starting to do really well for us. And so that's pretty cool. But, I think with quick service, the only thing that's kind of changed is we do a lot of catering, and a lot of the offices are not in session right now. So we lost that little part of our revenue, which I think is important. And we do a great lunch business. So there's that. And that's kind of shifted a little bit more to go and stuff like that. But overall speaking, I think it's just, losing the office crowd and getting the office crowd back. I think that when that comes back, it's going to look pretty normal. So
give us a sense of someone from a consumer standpoint now, because I think people are going to be really interested, because food trucks have, I have a friend that builds a bunch of food trucks for a bunch of the food truck owners out there. And so we were talking about it a while ago, and it's just such a cool thing for so many different people. That's probably going to be the, people are going to be attracted to that as a franchisee. But then, going into the brick and mortar, they have to get into that. But what's the difference between the menu and the look and the feel between food truck and actual brick and mortar? And then from a franchisee's perspective, how do they, think about all this from a business ownership standpoint? Great question. So the menu is much more streamlined on the food truck. Our food truck does some serious volume, and it's a different style of kitchen. So it needs to be a different menu. When we do smaller events, I let clients pick the gamut, whatever they want. If it's like a 30, 40 person event, you can do anything you want outside of, there's like two things I don't like doing on the truck. I don't like doing burritos because it's a kind of a spacing issue. And so there's a few exceptions, but outside of that, small events, carte blanche, you can do both. But for larger events, there's a big difference. So there's a much more streamlined menu. It's actually a little bit cheaper, but then you pay for the truck rental. So you get a little bit of a deal going with like a package combo from the truck. But the biggest difference to a consumer is we home make our amazing organic masa tortillas in store. And when you do it from the truck, it's pre-made. And it's obviously, it's a spatial, operation issue. But I've never had anyone complain in their life. I just noticed that, if I was a consumer, I think our draw is these organic, beautiful masa tortillas, and knowing that you get them fresh in store versus you get them made a little bit beforehand on the truck. It's just the only difference. And then there is a much smaller menu just based on effectiveness of the brand, but the menu is still have a wide enough variety that every dietary restriction can come there and enjoy it, whether you like spicy, whether you don't. So it really hits. It just hits a little different. Let's shift gears and talk about how you're setting this company up, the franchisor, up to scale. Because do you have any franchisees right now? I don't think you do, because we're just launching this thing. So, yeah. But you have payroll, you have people that are, setting this brand up for you. So this is a whole new endeavor for you. What are some of your goals? And then how are you building this team? Just give the audience some insight into we're talking about a brand that is just getting ready to launch. I've done this before, just getting ready to launch. I've talked about it on the podcast when I was launching Mighty Dog Roofing. But from your perspective, I don't think I've ever had anybody else on that has this brand that is ready for franchisee number one. Like what's going on behind the scenes there right now over at your franchise?
Oh, well, I'm thankful I get to be on the show, Eric. I feel like maybe I'm not there yet. No, but as far as the company, so I said that I'm surrounding myself by veterans. And so that's actually happening. Whether they're fractional or full-time, we have both. And so the goal for me was to really fill in the gaps with where I feel that I can't add value. And so I know I can add value by creating the coolest marketing materials that these people get to use, by creating the best menu items, by really doing what I'm good at. And so supporting them with a person who's been in the industry for 30 years, that was my first goal. And so we have that. And so that was a big part of it. Then another big part of it is, bringing some of the external services so that we can make sure to execute the menu correctly. And one of the other things I'm doing, and I hope not to discourage anyone who's listening to this from buying one, but I want to start, this is my baby. I started this company in my moving back home in my twin bed, when I was 21 years old. It's tattooed on my body. I care more about it than anything in the world. It's everything to me. And so giving it to people is definitely doable. And I'm excited to do that, but I'm going to be highly selective. I'm going to make sure every time we give it to somebody, they're going to be trained to the absolute maximum. They're going to be ready to take on the brand. And I'm going to do it in a way that I feel is sustainable. So I'm not going to use examples of other brands. We all know the burger company that overdid it. And we all know that there's a lot of QSR companies that went crazy and they sold all these franchises before really understanding their concept as a franchise. And I'm capitalized in such a way where I'm not in a rush. I've had this business for a long time. I'm not pressured by investors because I don't have any. It's just me. So I really want to build and grow a sustainable company that I'm proud of. And so for me, it's all about great support systems and learning from both the franchisee and the franchisor side, and surrounding myself with people who know the industry better than me, and maybe not know everything so I can bring some new life to it, because I think there's a nice harmonious balance between both, but using their expertise to really drive forward the concept.
Who are some of the mentors that you've had out there, whether it's in the food or business? And I know that we were talking before we hit record, you're part of EO, and I'm sure we have many mutual friends that are involved with that. But from mentors and just learning from other people, not so we don't have to always learn from our mistakes, because you've done some of that. Who do you like to listen to? Podcasts that you listen to, books that you read, people that you've met, paid mentors? Give us a sense of how you like to learn.
So I think mentorship and I think entrepreneurship is learning. I think the day you stop learning, you're going to probably be the worst entrepreneur in the world, because every day there's new things to deal with. And so I was blessed through EO. I found my first mentor who totally transformed my life. To the deepest sense. I wrote him a poem for his birthday. I'm obsessed. He's really the human that's changed my life. His name is Emilio. And he's helped me just become more in touch with who I am and just how to be a better entrepreneur and how to use my heart in business. Because I thought that was something you're not supposed to do. And I learned very quickly that using your heart in business is actually one of your biggest assets. And so that was what I learned from him. And I'm still work with him, and I still love him. And then I have Shelly, who is comes from medical franchise systems. And he's been incredible and really, really great in helping me understand how I want to build this franchise company. And then I've been talking to this guy, Jeff, who is a 40-year veteran, used to be Subway, used to be all these other great companies. And he's been super great, really just, looking at the business from inside out, been really helpful. Another guy from, I just to give you an idea, I used, in our first time with legal, I used a company called Fisher Zucker, and it was okay. It was nothing. They're great attorneys. It didn't motivate me. This time around, I was like, wait, I don't want to do that again. I just paid this guy a ton of money, and it was very transactional. I didn't learn anything. I want to interview these attorneys like they're going to be on my board. And so now I have this amazing attorney, Dan, Franchise Biz Law. I love him to death. And he guides me. It's not just like a legal, this is what I would do from a legal perspective. Daniel, did you think about this? Did you think about this? And then he introduced me to the person who wrote my operations manual. And that person, this guy, Kyle, who's been mentoring me, has been really great about helping me think about outside things from the business. And then I reached out on LinkedIn to 40 of my most amazing franchise F&B operators. And so I talked to Don, who's the CEO of Firehouse. Holy moly, the perspective this guy gave me. And so I'm doing everything in my power to learn from others. That's how I learn. I can read, and I do read, and I watch podcasts, I watch videos, but I think learning from people is my favorite thing in the world, because I love reading body language. I love reading people. And I think that's how I really get a lot out of growth. And so I've just been trying to surround myself with these veterans and just picking one thing from here, one thing from there, and trying to grow and be stronger that way.
You had to look at the different brands out there and how they've grown. There's been some big failures that we alluded to. And there's been some massive success stories out there. What brand or brands would you want Born from the Lime Truck to kind of follow?
Well, so it's not a franchise brand, but obviously I think Chipotle, I think we're in a category of theirs, but maybe a little higher end and a little bit more foodie focused. And so I think they did an incredible job. I'm in Colorado right now, their home state. And I'm impressed. I think so. The owner of Sweet Green sat me down for an hour. I'm friends with their family, and he explained to me how he looks at culture and how he looks at his business. And I left and I rewrote our whole culture book, and I rewrote our core values. And so I think when it comes to the franchise world, I'm still learning. I think I'm impressed with FranSmart, how they grew Halal Guys to 400 stores before they even opened their first one. And I'm impressed with seeing these companies that can do a lot in the franchise system, but I like the company-owned brands, and I want to adopt that into franchising. And so I'm also really impressed with a lot of the what's the chiropractic? There's
The Joint?
Chiropractic. Yeah, The Joint. Super impressed with The Joint, and I talked to a lot of their board members. So I'm learning a lot from these brands. In the food space, I think there's some great franchises, but I kind of like thinking about it from a non-franchise perspective of how I want to innovate the industry. Because I went to the franchise conventions, and our category, it's a little rough, And then my friend owns Ike's. I love Ike's. So Ike is one of my good friends. When he started his brand, I kind of started mine, and look where he is now. He grew up this huge, crazy company. But I've learned a lot from him, which I think is pretty cool too.
I've said it before, when you are looking at buying a franchise, you are buying into the owner, you are buying into the industry, you're buying the territory, that's important. And, listeners, you are getting a chance to get to know Daniel here and what drives him. And one of the things that I've noticed just in this interview, which is what I think is really important, is just out there going to get advice from people that you may or may not know. He's done that to be able to learn the things that he doesn't know today. He's going into franchising, and so many franchisors get into business because they have a really cool concept, and it might be sexy at the time, and then they franchise because it's easy to franchise. It just costs $500,000 and you can be a franchisor. And then if you want to, you could sell a bunch of franchises too, and then you're left with a pile of nothing and a bunch of upset franchisees if you don't do things the right way. I've seen a lot I've listened to what you've said, and I hear a lot of things that looks like you're going to be setting up Born from the Lime Truck with a lot of success, and you're setting it up foundationally the right way. So great job on this. What else would you want to leave the listeners with? I want to make sure if they're interested in learning more about the business, go to thelimetruck.com/franchising or /franchise. Go to thelimetruck.com/franchise. What else would you want to say to somebody that is thinking about buying or thinking about buying a franchise in general? What would you say to them?
I think a couple of things. I think one is, as you mentioned, and by the way, thank you so much, Eric. That was really sweet. I appreciate that. But I think one of the things is I'm an open book. I think there's nothing better than learning and being transparent. And that's how I am. And so I started a vlog a couple months ago. I was probably at one of the lowest points of my life. My mom had passed this past year. My businesses were suffering. COVID was really difficult to deal with. And I wanted to start this vlog from that moment and show what it takes to kind of overcome and be this good entrepreneur and be the best entrepreneur you can be. And so if you're interested in entrepreneurship, I would say check out that vlog. It's just my name, Daniel Shemtob, and see what I'm up to and understand the way I look at business. Because I think if you're going to buy into my brand, I want your core values to match my core values, because I want to be excited when I see you, and I want you to love me for helping you be on your entrepreneurial venture. Because I think one thing we've all learned is your reputation catches up with you. And if you've done good in this world, you get to do more good. And if you haven't done good, there's never too late to turn around, but it's a little bit harder, right? Because everything's on the internet. And so I want to be great. And that's why I'm an open book about everything. And then I think when it comes to a franchise, I think you have to really love the brand. I mean, I think that's where I really want to see is like passion and then experience. Because I was passionate when I started my food truck, but I couldn't tell you how to turn on the grill. And so there needs to be a little bit of both. And I think as a franchisee, what I'm learning is you really have to hone in both. You have to have the passion. You have to be a little bit of an outside thinker. I'm not looking for everyone to just do exactly what I say. I mean, yes, I am, but at some point too, I want to see people innovate. But I also need to see some experience. And so, I think it's finding that beautiful balance. And I think as a franchisee, if you are thinking about going into this, picking the right brand that you trust, picking the owner, and then also partnering with some experience. And if you don't have that experience, just like I did, I went and put it around me. So find a partner, give up a little bit, make sure you're aligned on your vision, make sure you can create a good partnership, and then come to me or come to whichever franchisor you want, and let's do something really cool.
I love it. Last thing I want to just point out is you talked about culture a handful of times. It's we could have had a whole session just on culture, because that is extremely important. I think that's the thing, probably one of the most underestimated things that people don't really give credit to when they're buying a franchise. You are getting into that franchisor's culture, which comes from the founder. So if you're looking at buying into a brand, listen to interviews like we just did with Daniel, because you start to understand the heart, you start to understand the man behind the brand, and that's who you're really partnering with. And that's that culture aligns with you. Just make sure that you see that with franchisees in any brand that you're looking at. So Daniel, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it. And I'm excited to see where you are in a year from now.
Thank you so much for having me, Eric. This was super fun.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.